So this reflection is based on Mark chapter 10 and the first 16 verses. It's a passage that deals with divorce, so it's perhaps not quite such an easy one. It's a passage that begins with some of the Pharisees coming to Jesus and says they wanted to test him. And so they asked him, is it legal for a man to divorce his wife? Now, there was probably a very deliberate reason behind them asking this, because the leader, Herod Antipas, had divorced his wife so he could marry his brother's wife, Herodias. John the Baptist had spoken up about this, and John the Baptist had lost his head because of it. I guess they were probably hoping that Jesus might get himself into trouble too. But he didn't try to answer their question. Instead, he said to them, well, what does the law say? And they quoted Deuteronomy 24. It says that a man may divorce his wife if he writes out a certificate of divorce, and he can send her away. And this is what it says. If a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her. So that's the grounds on which he could write her a certificate of divorce and send her away. And Jesus said, yeah, well, Moses allowed this because he knows your hearts are hard. But then he immediately goes back to the very purpose of creation. And this is Genesis 2. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. And so this is what Jesus actually said to the Pharisees. He says, but at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. It's the reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. So he uses that verse from Genesis, but he adds an explanation and strengthens the understanding that marriage is a creation of God, and it's a covenant between a man and a woman, and it's meant for life. So the question, is it legal, is actually a complete misunderstanding of marriage. Yes, one can legally divorce another, but it's breaking God's covenant. And that's why it brings such heartache. If the two become one, then when they are separated, there's a tearing apart, and it brings pain. Now, the pain may not be at the actual point of the final divorce. That might be a relief. But there's heartache along the way, and there's heartache for the family. There's heartache after the divorce, like how do we get on with the children or without the children? How do we cope financially? What's happened to all the hopes and dreams that we had when we married? So it never happens without pain. And Jesus spoke to his disciples and he said, if a man divorces his wife and marries another, then he commits adultery against her. Now, I've heard people say that if you marry again, that you are living in adultery. I even know someone who had to divorce a very abusive and alcoholic husband and made the decision that she would never remarry because she felt that was to dishonour the vows that she had made before God. And it's a very noble, I think, and brave decision to make, and very honouring of those vows. But what Jesus, I think, was saying in this instance, look, if a man finds another woman, he likes her a bit more, and so he divorces his wife so he can marry this other one, that is just adultery. And the fact that you actually go through the divorce doesn't legitimise the adultery. The divorce is just an attempt to cover it up. The thing is, though, that divorce does happen, and it happens for all sorts of reasons. There's no reason why a woman should live in a violent relationship. The abuse might be violence, or it could be actual neglect, or just sort of psychological violence. Or if a partner is constantly unfaithful, then the marriage covenant is actually broken anyway. There are many, many reasons why marriages break up. Some are quite legitimate, others are just plain selfishness. So what if our marriage has broken up? How do we deal with it? For a Christian, there needs to be the realisation that we have broken a sacred covenant, and for that we need to confess our part in the breakup. And by confessing, I mean we need to see this as a sin, bring it before God to confess it, and then repent of it. If we're sincere in doing that, then we are forgiven and set free. God does forgive sin when we confess and repent. So we're set free, we can marry again. And that second marriage is valid in God's eyes. It can bring fulfilment, it can bring happiness. The one thing it really can't do is reflect God's original intention for marriage, which was that it is exclusive and it is lifelong. God wants us, this is the ideal, He wants us to live in a stable relationship. He wants children to grow up in a stable home. It's when this breaks down that society begins to break down, and we can see this all around us today, the breakdown of the family.